The regional chairman of Region 6, Mr. David Armagon, recently reported that $42 million was spent on COVID-19 expenses since March. More from Ronetta Court.
In this region so far, $42 million was spent for COVID expenses. $42 million. I just looked at the figure.
Which period?
And at the moment, there is no examination gloves, there is no sterile gloves, there is no mask, there is no isolation gowns, and many, many other basic things which should be present in the system is not available.
That was Regional Chairman of Region 6, Mr. David Armagon, as he reported that since March 2020, $42 million was spent in COVID-19 expenses. However, there is still a shortage in basic medical equipment.
We have to start working to accumulate these things because we cannot put our people at risk. Because if you don't have these, basic medical stuff that the doctors and the nurses will use, then you're putting them at risk, and so we cannot afford to have that. So hopefully from tomorrow we'll have some of these, or we can maybe buy some of these things immediately to get going.
Mr. Armagon noted that he finds it very odd that with such a big sum of money spent, there is still a lack in medical equipment. He also noted that the Regional COVID-19 Task Force will be carrying out an audit to examine how the monies were spent.
But I'm surprised that we have spent so much money, $42 million, and yet these things are not in place. You know, one would have expected that as we proceed, you know, I would have expected that all of these things were in place. Virtually, they have very little things in which they operate. All right, and therefore we want to know, and we're going to do an investigation as to how this $42 million was spent. We want to know if the stores collected all these items that we have paid for, because we have paid for these items already. And so tomorrow an audit will be started at the stores to find out when these things came in, how it came in, at what time it came in, and how it was distributed.
He later added,
in education alone, we probably have about $10 million alone in education spent on fumigation stuff and so. And this, what I'm talking about is not medicine, you know. What I'm talking about here is basic things like gloves, sterilizers, fumigation stuff and so. Stuff that, you know, is related to the COVID. I'm not talking in medicine. When we look at the medicines that are needed in the hospital, the drugs that are needed in the hospital, I don't know. There's a long list of drugs that are needed in the hospital. And so when you look, you know, people talk about what they were doing in the health system, and, you know, things were, so but when you look at the reality there now, quite a number of drugs and medicines are in short supply.
The chairman further highlighted that it will be a great task trying to get these materials.
And we have to get them in place. There's no extra film. X-ray is a basic thing that has to be done when people get injury or for any other purpose. There is no X-ray film in the hospital. Basic drugs are not available in the hospital. And so we have an uphill task to make sure that, you know, some of these things we get very quickly in place. So I even had a discussion with the Minister of Health last night, and I sent a long list of stuff that we wanted. And he was also telling me those things are not available in the bond. And so we now have to very quickly, the government now has to very quickly go and buy emergency drugs, these emergency drugs, and have an emergency order so that we can get these drugs coming very quickly to run our system here.
Mr. Armagon later mentioned that these problems do not paint a good picture of the region's health system. It was also reported that the post of Director of Regional Health Services is no longer occupied by Mr. Jevon Stephen due to a termination of his contract. When asked if someone else has been appointed, the chairman made these remarks.
Not as yet, but Dr. Ramsakal is overseeing the office at the moment. Dr. Ramsakal. He's very well respected in the region. He's very experienced. and I think he is a very nice person to get along with. And I think he, in the meanwhile, whilst no one is there, I think he's capable of holding the fort until someone is appointed.
Mr. Armagon has noted that the region's health service will be working to ensure that all issues are resolved in a timely manner. Reporting for Channel 8 News, Renetta Kurt.